Let's take you to Cape Town now, where Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will once again table that fiscal policy framework after two failed attempts. His first one didn't take off, of course, as political parties represented in the government of national unity couldn't agree on the contents. Godongwana was able to present his revised statement weeks later, but it was also shot down over contentious issues such as the VAT increase. Today, he faces the tough task of closing fiscal gaps without sparking tax turbulence. Aldrin Sampear has been in Parliament then for us this morning and joining us again. A little bit earlier, we had that discussion on what solutions could be at play from the MK party. They're making themselves clear on the stance here, on how exactly we need to fix things.
Yeah, certainly. And I think the other thing about a budget speech is also the question about whether that budget is able to inject the right amount of confidence or even the right amount of money that is required to actually get South Africa to become that construction site that the Democratic Alliance has been speaking about. And this then speaks to this issue around creating jobs. And if you remember during the elections as well, in the campaigning during the elections and all of the slogans that we were hearing during the elections, at the top of the agenda of every political party was creating jobs, But when we look at the stats that have come out, it certainly tells us that we've actually been failing on that particular part, even with the government of national unity being in place. But I want to bring in now Clotilde Angelucci into this conversation. She's the acting project lead at Youth Capital to speak about the impact that South Africa's non-economic growth is having on young people, specifically also, Clotilde, what has come out of the latest job stats is an indication. Once again, we've always been told that education will actually bring you a job, but we find that the number of graduates are increasing, but so is the unemployment of graduates.
Yes, the latest stats confirm that, the latest unemployment stats confirm that there isn't like a silver bullet to solving unemployment. So we've seen, if you look at the income and expenditure survey released from Stats SA at the beginning of the year, there's definitely a connection between educational achievement and income inequality. But we must also ask ourselves, when graduates leave the institution, tertiary institutions, and join the queue of job seekers, are they joining an economy that has got touch points for them? Are we creating opportunities? Are we creating pathways for them to join the economy? And if we look at the latest stats, we've seen like a decrease in the formal employment. So definitely they are studying and they're getting their degree in an economy that is not growing, and that doesn't help them tap into opportunities.
Yeah. And then you hear initiatives, for instance, like the YES program, and the president speaks quite boldly and fondly of the YES program. But what difference do programs like those make, if any at all?
So as Youth Capital, we've seen the importance of the first work experience. We've seen that like a great number of young people are unemployed. They've never worked in the formal sector before. So programs like the YES program and also public employment programs really have the potential to de-risk employment by really fostering or giving young people first work opportunities, and there's a focus on soft skills. And something else that the YES program has done really well is really including the private sector. But remember, with 1 in 2 young people are unemployed at the moment with the expanded definition. This is a systemic issue. This is really big, and it can't be solved. Yes, and we know that the majority, like 50% of the labor force is young people. So we're really wasting our potential. So we must also set our expectations for what these programs can achieve in our current economy. And the focus is really on the role that the budget play as a fiscal tool to really like increase investments and real spending in the economy.
Yeah. There's been 2 attempts at delivering the budget. This is the 3rd one. I wonder whether any of the 2 previous attempts give you a bit of confidence that perhaps maybe this issue around using a budget and the fiscal program to try and stimulate the economy and create jobs gave us the answers that are required, and whether 3.0 will be doing that as well.
So as Youth Capital, we really, we're confident in the public participation process that has followed the budget, because if you look at the submissions to the Financial Standing Committee, the committee received an unprecedented number of 52 submissions, 50 of which were against the VAT increase. So I think it's great that I've read on the news how this budget has been like a tool of diplomacy in the GNU, but we must remember that the budget is actually not a GNU product. The budget is for the people of South Africa. So it's really important that the focus is not how parties can trade off, but how young people and people can live in a society where they can be everything they want to be, right? So it's really important to focus on how this budget needs to really prioritize on the socioeconomic needs of South Africans.
What would you like to hear from the Minister this morning, or this afternoon rather?
We, as Youth Capital, we would like to hear confirmation of the public employment spending, because we've seen the role the public employment plays in promoting first work experience, stimulating the economy at local level, and also promoting spending, consumer demand. But at the same time, we need to see that this budget is not a technical adjustment. We need to see that it's a commitment, it's an expression of the commitment that the government has expressed in creating an inclusive society and promoting long-term job creation for everybody.
Yeah, an inclusive society, very important, of course, considering the history of this country. Thank you so much. That is Clotilda Angelucci, the acting project lead at Youth Capital, around their expectations ahead of the budget speech 3.0 that will be delivered by Minister Enoch Godongwana. Minister Enoch Godongwana, of course, Minister deployed from the ANC, and we know that the ANC is the leader of the Government of National Unity. And speaking about the ANC, I'm now joined by the ANC's Chief Whip in Parliament, that is Mdumiseni Ntuli. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. I want to start off with the conversation that we just ended now with Clotilda, and that is the budget being able to actually give a promise or speak to a promise of job creation, because at the end of the day, people want to have jobs.
Sure. Good morning to viewers. I mean, you're quite right. It's important that the budget must give a direction, a signal in terms of how we intend to grow the economy. Because even before you can talk about foreign investment, your own approach in terms of the structure of the budget, promoting expenditure, addressing the challenges of infrastructure, social expenditure in the main, and also investing in the economy is what is central to the economic growth. You are not going to deal with the challenges of unemployment, poverty and inequality, and also to ensure that you grow the economy unless you promote expenditure, you hire more nurses and teachers in the departments where you need to do that, so that you have got more people who are going to be part of the working force of the Republic, as a consequence of which you generate more resources that are required by the state to deal with the number of imperatives we're confronted with.
And considering the conversations that have been taking place amongst the members of the Government of National Unity and what will be proposed today by the Minister, some analysts are saying that we could see a revised growth once again, downwards once again from 1.9% to 1.5%, which again doesn't give the confidence that is required, that we actually have an economy that should be growing.
Sure, well, it may very well be, but that may not necessarily simply have to do with what the structure of our budget is. You've got to look at many factors, including how the global economy is performing, because South Africa is not isolated from the rest of the world. So the impact of what is happening in the European economy, the Americans, and everywhere, including Eastern Asia, will have some kind of a negative or positive impact to what is happening to our own economy. What I think is very, very, very important for us, especially as the MPs of the ANC, is that once the budget has been appropriated, especially the one that deals with the infrastructure, addressing the problems relating to the water supply in the country, the energy and electricity, improving the conditions of our ports, it's important that we ensure that the ministers who are responsible for those departments spend that money and do so effectively and efficiently, so that we don't have a situation the following year where there are rollovers because departments were not able to spend the money that was allocated to them. Because the problem around economic growth, it also has to do with the capacity of the state itself to spend the resources that are allocated to various departments, more and above what then get injected by what we call the foreign and domestic business investment into the economy. So it's very, very important that that which is allocated to each department is effectively and efficiently spent as per the allocation the Minister of Finance would have made.
Yeah, and I think that also then speaks to who holds them accountable. Because it's one thing for a department or province to say that, well, we didn't spend the money and the money had to go back to Treasury. But who's held accountable? Because at the end of the day, this is money that is meant to, one, speak about service delivery. And we know the cold face of service delivery is local government. And that's where every building exists. Even this building exists in a local government.
Sure. You are quite right. I think it has to start with us as members of parliament, even before you go to provinces and local government. My view is that, and this is a view we share as members of the ANC in parliament in this administration, we've got to change the way in which we enforce accountability of our ministers. For example, you've got to have a sense and make the minister account on quarterly basis in order to ascertain whether or not this department will be able to spend the money allocated to them by the end of the financial year. Not to wait until the AG gives a report in which they are going to say there are wrong decisions made or the expenditure has not been in line with what the items were budgeted for. There is a way in which we need to change the focus of the ANC MPs in Parliament to ensure that ministers on regular basis, when they appear before portfolio committees, we're not just dealing with issues at the global level, but we also pose the questions in relation to the money that was appropriated to your department. How far are you in terms of the expenditure on key items that have got to do with the economic growth and infrastructure for our country? And of course, once we instill that culture at that level, I'm quite certain that the subnational level, your province and local government, in one way or the other, they will also improve in terms of how they relate with those who are assigned responsibilities of leading government at that level. But I agree with you. The state of our municipality is worrying for all of us. There is work that government is doing. The team that is led, President has set up various teams in Etewu, in Johannesburg, and other parts of the country. But we can't say that is sufficient. Yep. There's more challenges at that level, and we believe that we need both a political intervention, especially from the municipalities led by the ANC, but a governance intervention. Because some of these issues, they intertwine between what is called political and administrative interface in terms of the weaknesses that have been identified at that level.
Let me just quickly squeeze in this question. The president, of course, being in Washington, D.C., the issue around Starlink, Bloomberg is reporting that there may be a deal on the table that was supposed to have been discussed last night. Not too sure how much you know about that. But is there a push, as the Minister of Communications had argued before, to introduce the equity equivalent investment programs to allow for Starlink to come in, somehow bypassing what the Electronics Communications Act says when it comes to that 30% equity, at least for previously disadvantaged people? Is that on the cards?
No, I'm not aware of it, Aldrin. I would be lying if I say I'm privy to the conversation currently taking place in the U.S. What I understand is that as a country, we've agreed on how to deal with a number of issues, including what we need to do in the communication space and various other sectors of the economy. And if there are new discussions and decisions made in the visit of the President in the United States of America, we are not yet privy to that kind of information.
Okay, but you'll be against the bypass of the 30% equity?
Look, Aldrin, how we work, in terms of how we work as the ANC-led government, you define policies through which you are going to implement your own program. And in the course of the implementation of your own program, if the conditions demand that you've got to do things differently, there's what we call the balance of evidence. You may very well decide that this is the direction I want to take, and you start pursuing that direction. And in the course of your own journey, you discover that there are certain weaknesses in what I wanted to do. It may take long for me to achieve my objectives, or it might not at all, make you meet your own intended objectives. And in conditions like that, leadership has got to evaluate various options and decision choices that have to be made. So I wouldn't say if that happens, it would be something that is unexpected or something that is expected. We are in a process of rebuilding our own economy, and there would be new interventions here and there that must be, but we have to ensure that whatever we do is in line with the policy orientation of our country, because we're a country and we've got to implement our own policies in line with what we have communicated to our people.
Thank you so much for your time. Dumisani Ntuli is the chief whip of the ANC there on their expectations ahead of the budget speech that will be delivered by the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, a bit later on today, around about 2 o'clock later on this afternoon. Of course, we refer to it as Budget 3.0. And let's see what's going to happen after that and what the reaction is going to be to that. I have to say, though, Arabile, I'm really interested in the Starlink conversation as well, because Kusela Diko, you remember, who's the communications portfolio chairperson, had come out against that directive that had come from Soli Malatsi, who's the Minister of Telecommunications, with that equity equivalent program, which would somehow bypass the 30% that is needed, according to the Electronics Communications Act, for 30% of a company being led or being held by previously disadvantaged group.